Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel I guess. It's my first time doing this. Don't know if I'll do it again, we'll see how this goes. But I thought it'd be really nice to record at least one video of my workflow and how I do things, because I know some people are interested. And it's always nice to see how people work through what they're doing. So in this, I saw the new horses and I was like, oh, you know, they live in a forest. I looked up some photos of the Black Forest and I thought it was really pretty, you know, European area, and I was quite inspired by it. So I thought, you know what, I'll create a forest, and I'll make some trees and put them into a scene with the new horse and hopefully come out with something pretty. So here you can see me creating some trees. I think this is the most creation heavy part of this render. I didn't do very much modelling or anything for it at all. Most of it was pre-made assets or assets that I already had just laying around from previous renders or university work. And even this, you know, I'm not actually modelling anything, I'm just using geometry nodes to create trees basically and then put them into the scene. I was having a couple issues with these trees actually. They were driving me insane, nothing was working correctly, so I do actually go back and recreate all the trees again for a second time in a minute. Here you can see me adding all of the ground foliage in though, so I just used a little scatter pack to put them all over the mesh or the ground that I've got laid out, blocked in, and then I go in manually and put some bushes and stuff in as well. You can see I'm using like asset libraries that I've already got, and it's really nice because it's just like The Sims, just drag and drop things into your scene and create an environment. It's like building. It's awesome. As you can see though, you could very quickly go up in vertice count. So I'm at 2 million there because I've dragged in some really high quality trees in the background, and I don't think I noticed for a little bit, and then I'll go back and delete them all because I realised that, oh, this does not need to be this big of a render, especially considering they're not front and centre view. You can't see them very much, so there you go. I go in and I delete all of them, and then I just go in with some of the less high quality ones, and fix them basically. Here you can see I go back to create some more trees. This is because I've been having issues with Blender 4.4. I used 4.2 for a really long time, and they've changed some of the settings when it comes to like opacity and leaves and the way that cycles works, or I think maybe Eevee works, I'm not sure, but it just meant that you have to increase the light paths through translucent textures a ton for there to not be this black artifacting in leaves, which I found pretty infuriating. I feel like there's probably some other workarounds which I just haven't noticed or figured out. They probably just changed the way something works or changed a setting and I just haven't noticed it. But it was an absolute nightmare with these trees, as you can see. I'm going back in and creating an asset pack out of all of these trees instead of dragging them in on an FBX because it was just creating so much artifacting. So I'm unwrapping them all and actually creating assets for them, which was a bit of a pain, but it means I've got trees, I guess. Not that they're very good quality trees, I'm not sure if I'll use these again in another render, just because up close you can tell they're really low poly trees, because I knew that they wouldn't be front and center, and trees very quickly increase the poly count of a render, to the point where it's millions of vertices and polygons, you know, and you don't normally want it to go that high. So here you can see I've placed them into the scene. Well, the new trees I've placed into the scene, these ones are much higher quality, and the foliage, the leaves themselves are a little bit more dense, so you don't see through them as much, which I think was an issue with the trees I had in here previously. They just looked half dead, you know, there weren't very many leaves on the trees. Here I add in a willow. I tried adding a willow tree in. It didn't go very well in creation. It looks really similar to the ones in Crescent Moon Village in Star Stable, you know, where there's that swamp area and the willow trees just look abysmal. That's what mine looks like. So I really wanted to add it to be like flowing over the water, you know, and the stream and the leaves. But it didn't look great. So I've got it slightly off to the side so you can't really see it. I think in the final render I posted on Instagram you can see maybe one branch, because it just didn't turn out very well. And in the background, you know, the poly count was getting pretty high, so I just added some billboard trees into the background there just to thicken up the density without creating tons of artifacting with layering loads of translucent textures on top of each other and creating that black artifact thing again, which I was having a lot of issues with in this render. I do need to figure it out because I use a lot of trees in my renders, and if that continues to happen, I think I might go crazy. For the rest of this though, I think I'm just adding in some more foliage on the ground. You can't see it, but I keep going into like render view, but because it opens in a different tab and I was just recording like the main interface of Blender, you can't see it. But I do, that's why I pause, because I go in and out of render view to see things how they actually look. Here I'm creating a water shader. I thought all of my normals were inside out there because I accidentally used a glossy BSDF instead of a gloss, so the water wasn't looking right, but it's basically just color gloss with a volume absorption to make it look like it's darker as it goes down, and then a noise texture with a bump node, and that just, it creates ripples that kind of look like water. And here I'm creating a weight paint to basically tell the grass not to go too close to the river, because obviously when you get really close to a riverbank there's not much grass because the water levels go up and down, and I'm just telling the grass basically do not grow right next to the river, but that's what that does, that little red painting thing that I was doing there. There I was trying to create ripples in the water, so the height of the ripples would go up and down, but I decided against it because it's just, you can increase the poly count a lot, and unless the poly count is really high for the water shade, like the water box that I'm using, it just doesn't look great. So instead I left it as a plane and I added rocks around the river to give it a sense that it was kind of lapping against the shores instead of just that harsh line up against the ground texture that I have. And then I'm going back in and adding some more assets, just detailing the area. I go in and out of rendered view a lot here just to see which areas are sparsely populated from the camera view, and then adding some in around there. So I think it's always important. You guys don't see it, obviously, because I'm only recording one part of my Blender view, but it's important to basically step back from the canvas, you know, like in real life you step back and have a look at it, and then make changes as you see fit. Here I'm creating a fog texture basically, which will give a bit of depth to the scene because I didn't add field of view. I don't know why I didn't. I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, I probably should have added that, but oh well. I did add 2 layers of fog, so one is just to add a general eeriness to like the forest, you know, it's damp, and then the other one to make the background, you know, fade into the fog a little bit more quickly. Just because I want to create the early morning vibes of a forest, you know, when all the water is like evaporating off the ground and creating a misty environment. And here I'm trying to create God rays through the fog. So this is what I'm adding now. That's a go-go, which is basically just a black and white texture which you can shine light through and create some rays of light through a volume that you've got in a scene or fog. I was having an awful lot of issues with the fog in this. I don't know. I know how to use lighting. I just, for some reason, couldn't today. It just wasn't working. I think it was a bit of both. I think it was me just forgetting things and a bit of 4.4 and changing a little bit just settings and the way that cycles works. But it came out okay. I wasn't massively chuffed with the lighting in this scene. I normally like really dramatic lighting, and I guess I got it, but it wasn't what I envisioned in my head. I don't think I had a good enough vision to create in the actual scene, which I think was the issue. I didn't really know what I wanted, and then it created a bit of a mess, really, at the end. Even at the end of the render, I go back and do more to the lighting. That's how annoying it was. But here, this is the new horse. I had to weight paint all of this manually. This is the first time I've had it with these Star Stable models, normally they're pretty good and you can automatically weight them and the rig just works. But in this one it wasn't. All the legs were just kind of weighted to the same points and it was driving me insane. It wasn't working, so it wasn't great that I had to manually do that. But it's fine, as long as the legs move, you know, I can get a basic pose, and you can see I've moved them into the scene here and I'm starting to pose them. As long as I can do that and it somewhat works, it's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect because I go in with a sculpt brush afterwards, after I've got the basic pose, just to clean it all up. Yeah, I do it here. You can just see I'm kind of using it like a clay brush brace basically and just making everything look a little bit more in proportion. I wasn't a massive fan of these models. They reminded me of the Criollo. To be honest, I think Star Stable definitely did use the same model as the Criollo. And then they just reshaped and resized things, which is a bit of a shame. They've done it multiple times though, at this point, and you can always tell because the textures will map. If the texture maps from one horse to another horse like model, you can tell that they've used the same base model and they've resized things. So I'm sure if I got the Criollo and tried to map one of these coats to the Criollo model, it would just work. Here as well, I've got the mane and tail. I took the wrong textures for each one. So for the over one shoulder texture, I took the chestnut by accident instead of the bay, and for the one that was supposed to be chestnut, I took the bay mane. So I had to go into the shader editor and just change them there because I didn't want to go back into Star Stable files and basically rip a ton more assets at this point in the render when it's almost done. But I think it's fine. I don't think anyone noticed that the tails aren't correct. To be honest, they look decent. I'm happy with them. The only thing is, you know, in this sort of environment, the Star Stable models will just look like Play-Doh because they're a stylistic. They are stylized and the rest of the render isn't. But this is the final render that I created. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looked decent. But I hope you enjoyed listening to my rambling about how I do this. Blender's an incredible tool. It's hard to learn. It's scary to learn. But it's awesome and I love it. And I think everyone should at least try it. If you guys have got any suggestions on what I should add to these videos, or if you want different things being shown, or maybe like if you want me to do the render views as well throughout the process, I can do that. But yeah, any suggestions, any ideas, please tell me, message me on Instagram or put them in comments. I don't even know how YouTube works. I will see you all next time. Thank you for watching the video.